Welcome. This is a later recording of a presentation I held at the WAPOR Conference in 2025. There were so many who wanted to see this later, so we decided to record it afterwards. This is a presentation where we try to explain from a broader perspective how we see that populism has risen in so many Western countries. We take a stance from the Swedish perspective, but we also look at the global perspective at the same time. And if you look at the picture, I think that frames it so much. A woman on the bike saying, I think it's hard to find information online on what party to vote for if I just want everything to be all right. And doesn't that just frame it perfectly? Isn't that where we all are feeling right now? Trying to avoid catastrophe, not looking for a better future, but just making sure that it isn't going to hell even worse. If we start then, what is populism? This is my attempt to define this and what I see is that primary goal is to get power, not to govern. Govern is secondary. You don't even think about that during the campaigns. And in a world that don't make sense, populism is feeding from false narratives, focusing on real problems, but basically ignoring the solutions and willingly making the conflict even worse, taking its strength from the anger and the fear that it stirs up. Focus on the problem, as I said, and simplify or ignoring the solution. This is nothing new, but it's in a rapidly growing census world, conspiracy may be the only sensible answer, because it looks like someone must be controlling this, because it can't just be random. But the sad thing is that most is just random, and that the politicians and media are only reacting to things that happen. If we take a step back even further and look at how we form our opinion about our society. If you've seen my presentations before, you probably recognize this one, because I've done it a bunch of times. It's you and I in the middle. And just to understand our closer society, it's human interaction. We know the people around work, school, neighborhood, and that makes us form a balanced or a nuanced view of our closest surroundings. But the further we move away, it is actually traditional media that still form the picture. Some of you may think, hang on, social media. Yes, they are here, but they're just a transportation. I maybe should have added TikTok as well here, and I should have updated the Twitter logo, but I don't feel like it actually, because I think we all think of it as Twitter still. But these are just transportations, and the traditional media are the main source of information that we get, but it may come from social media. But social media as such is not a content creator. So we have to differentiate that this is really important to understand. So we still have a basic foundation of our understanding of the Western world based on traditional media and media logic. And we have no chance of seeing, which is turning this into black and white words. But you see the nuances in your closer vicinity. So even if you are living in an area where there is a lot of bad news happening, you as an individual living there can see the nuances, but you cannot if you don't live there, because then you only have the traditional black and white media image. And we have this media logic where emotions always trumps knowledge, because if I'm angry, it will always be true. And this kinds of debate are the foundation of most of the media coverage right now, that you have debates where emotions are being put against knowledge. This is creating something that's called a false balance. False balance is nothing new. Actually, BBC were the ones who said we will not do the false balance anymore in climate debates. And this false balance means that there's one scientist stating that there is no climate change, debating one science stating that it is a balance climate change. But what it doesn't show is that the majority of the scientists are on the climate change side. So it creates a false balance between two equally big sides, which isn't true. BBC stopped that around scientific and climate change almost 10 years ago, I think. but they still did it on everything else. And the news media still are working with this false balance because it creates an entertaining debate. Actually, after Brexit, BBC once again realized that they unfortunately had a false balance on the Brexit topic. So they did learn on one thing, but they didn't learn on the other. And the rest of the Western media is having the exact same thoughts about this. An entertaining debate is the key to news reporting on live TV. And in the same logic, facts get replaced by new alternative facts. Breaking news, Apple might cause cancer. So when Kellyanne Conway said, we have alternative facts, she was actually only formulating the things that the media have been doing for such a long time. They just were extra provoked because it was Kellyanne Conway protecting Trump's reasoning with the words, and did not realize that they had been doing this or laying the foundation for this for such a long time. But new alternative facts, breaking news of new hypotheses as being facts creates an uncertainty. You don't know what to trust anymore. The world can change in a second, and you will know it from the push notices from your cell phone, from the news media. And this creates a situation where we do not see who or what we can trust anymore. The world as we knew it may be something else tomorrow. The natural reaction to that is to worry and plan up, because your circle of trust is shrinking. You are not sure, okay, you can trust your family, you can trust your closest friends, but you cannot trust the government, you cannot trust the news media, you cannot trust the police. So you're creating this situation where you do not know what to trust. So the post-truth area, as people talk about, it's actually a post-trust area, where the trusted actors that we had before can no longer be trusted. And this is circular, so it goes round and round and getting us further and further down this post-trust situation. What is the core problem about this? It's not about left or right. Everyone wants to talk about left and right. It's not about political ideology. It's about stopping a perceived and real negative development. So the populist parties are more like a emergency brake than the real solution. We have lost trust in the future, and we worry about what's going to happen next. So a lot of people, when we do research about this, most people, at least in Sweden, don't see populists as a solution, but the emergence stop. This is, of course, changing. More and more are also starting to trust the populist movement parties because they realize no one has fixed it. But the key to this is that they are basically the emergency stop. So they don't have to fix the problems to the same extent as the traditional parties. So they have a lot. That's also why they can be so aggressive and non-political, because they're not expected to really fix the problems. They get more slack than any other party would ever have. And if we look on the political campaigns in the Western society, the focus is actually to demobilize voters. The worst thing that could happen is if someone voted on your political opponent as a political consultant. It's not about getting voters to join your party, because that takes time. Then you have to build trust. The focus is to demobilize trust in the opposing party. And when we also have this situation from media logic, when everything has to be black or white, it turns into a binary world with two sides, which is also being used by political consultants and political parties. So you're forced to make these false choices. For instance, to combat crime, you have to choose between punishment or taking care of the criminals. The real answer is, of course, both. But you're forced to choose these false choices. And what's happening then is that you, as a voter, are being pushed out to the two extremes. But not everyone is willing to follow. And the center of this is the normal distribution curve, which is a good representation of also the opinions of most most topics in most Western civilizations or how people think. And the biggest center, they tend to lead. They don't want to make these false choices. So that you're either being pushed out or you leave the political discussion totally. Which is okay for the political parties, which is probably the most destructive thing, because they only need a majority of the seats in the parliament. They don't care if the number of voters go down as long as they have the majority. I also have a hypothesis from the American election that because there are also even more who didn't vote that were eligible to vote than did vote. And my hypothesis, I haven't been able to prove it, I haven't checked it yet, is that the undecided are the one in the middle of this false choice, that you have to choose between two bad candidates. Either you choose for Trump, against Harris, or against Trump, more than for anything of them. They're just focusing on getting you to not vote for the other side, and it's either black or white. The compromise solution is never there. And if you look at, this is also quite an old picture, but it still works. If we look at the situation right now, when immigration is actually the key for so many of the political discussion, what does that really mean? It means that we realize that the money for all the problems that we see every day, welfare state, structural collapse, unemployment, insecurity, everything, the resources are being taken away from these topics because of immigration. It doesn't mean that the immigration per se is a problem. It's that we feel that we have limited resources that cannot be focused on, or the problems there cannot be focused on because immigration is sucking all the air out of the room. But we also have a loss of perspective. We feel that often now feel like a minority group is a majority group. Because they get so much attention in the public space and the media space that you lose perspective. So for a Swedish perspective, it feels like in the public space, the immigrants take so much public space that you feel left out as a person living in Sweden already. But you never get the real perspective of this, because in truth, the perspectives are mirrored, but they are not in the public space. So you misunderstand how the world actually looks, because no one takes their time to do that. And if you look at how the leader is perceived, it's always in a Western perspective, when we have free media, it's never anything good. It's corruption, low trust in politicians, stupid, he's unprepared, he's greedy, there's power struggle. And if you look at the dictators, the different dictators in the world, they control the media. That is because they do not want the leader to come into this bad perspective. It's always the great leader has fixed our problems when the dictator controls the media. In the US, we now have a very interesting situation where the media is actually being controlled in other ways, trying to fix this picture. It's not a good thing, but it's also not a good thing where the leader always is perceived in a bad perspective. Because then you cannot uphold what you really need to do, govern. If you only focus on the bad things about something, you miss the perspective of the actual things that's going on in the world, and that some things actually isn't the politician's fault. So the truth is, of course, somewhere in the middle. But in this black and white presentation, there's never any middle. This leads to larger voter mobility. Because you don't have the perspective. You feel like the leader is always weak. Immigration, which means that no one is taking care of all the problems that need to be taken care of. And this insecurity leads you to always punish the sitting ruler. And so the voter mobility is extremely high the last 10 years now, and it will continue to be that there, because you always see that the sitting leader is always the problem from a media perspective. And if you have all this lack of perspective, insecurity, weak leader, large voter mobility, and the immigration, we don't see any trust in the future. A majority, and this is a little bit old, but I think we have the same level still. A majority of the Swedes think the future is not going to be better than it was yesterday. We want to protest because we know we, as an individual, we pay our taxes, we follow the law, and we vote. That's basically the deal for the normal voter to be in. So it's not our fault. We are doing everything we are expected to do, but the leader aren't doing their part. And we always know it was better before. That's also a human trait, which I think is the basis for us actually being alive as humans in general, because we always remember the good stuff and we forget about the bad stuff. If it were the opposite, we probably wouldn't want to have another. We wouldn't be able to survive if we only remember the bad stuff and not remember and forgot the good stuff. But since we aren't thinking like that, it can be misused by populists. We are the victim. We have to find the guilty party. And here we also have the megaphone, which is often the populist as well, just saying, this is the guy to blame. If you vote for me, I will make sure he or she will be blamed. And maybe also saying I will fix this, but people don't need to trust the fix part. It's enough that this guy points out the guilty party that's being portrayed by the public discussion media focus for such a long time. This is also actually 8 years old picture, but it still works, unfortunately. And because I have a friend who's a cartoonist, and I asked him to draw this for me. And because the core of this is that we do not understand how the world really looks like anymore. It's focused on all the negative, focus on who to blame, and no focus on the correct perspective of the situation or on the nuanced picture of what to do to move forward. And that is basically a key problem here is the media climate change. The digitalization turned news media into be a binary thing. It sounds weird that it's just ones and zeros, but it's a black and white world. And that is creating all this situation that we have. And the politicians gladly adapt to that because they feel that it's a quicker way to gain power, but it's impossible to stay in power. But since we're focusing on the conflict all the time, everyone adapts. Because people aren't stupid. But the problem today is more and more think that almost everyone else is stupid. You only see the bad parts in the public space. So we have a huge trust issue in society because of this. But we can change this if we all understand our role. The politicians must have visions, because that is really what you're voting for, someone to take care of the country and moving us into a better future than we have today. You cannot be stuck in just chasing power and staying in power. You have to focus on an idea that will attract voters. Media has actually two laws in the Constitution that protect their business: freedom of speech and freedom to print. They must take the responsibility and start explaining, not just describing what's happening and focusing on the bad thing. Even bad things should be presented, but it has to be put in a perspective. You have to know if this is the biggest thing really that's happening for us as citizens, or if it's just a shocking story. Universities and scientists, they have a really big responsibility as well. Well, they must protect and share knowledge, because that is actually their role, and they are also funded by the taxpayers. Us as the public, we are actually helpless without these three actors not taking responsibility for their part in this publicly funded society that we have in a democracy. We cannot, sure, we can learn to be critical, but then we become critical against everything. If these three actors do not take their part in this for real, the responsibility for the real, we as the public will tend to be attracted more to the populist parties. thank you. That was it. If you want to contact me, you see my contact information here. Thank you.